Unit 7, Part 5 notes. I can solve quadratic equations by using the quadratic formula. First off, let's talk solutions of a quadratic equation. So the quadratic solutions are also known as the x-intercepts. The x-intercepts are the solutions. So sometimes we can have two solutions because we can cross the x-axis two times. With that curve, it comes up and comes down and crosses it. Sometimes we only have one solution where just that one point, the top or the bottom of that graph, touches the x-axis. And sometimes we will have no crossings on that x-axis, so we'll have no real solution. And in next unit, Unit 8, we're going to talk more about the graphical representations of quadratic equations, but I just wanted to give you that visual to remind you that sometimes we'll have two solutions, sometimes we'll have one solution, and sometimes we will not have any solutions to a quadratic equation. So we're going to go through one example of each type of solution as we work with this quadratic formula. So the first thing is, what is the quadratic formula? So the quadratic formula is this equation right here. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So it's kind of a mouthful, but once we plug everything in, it's a really nice and easy way to find the solutions of a quadratic equation. Now, the one thing is we have to have our quadratic equation written in this form right here before we start. So it's in standard form. We start with that highest power, that x squared term. Then we go to the x term, and then we go to the term with no variable, that constant value. And then it's also equal to 0. That's a big piece. It does need to be set equal to 0, just like we were working with before. So when we look at this equation that we're given, x squared, or 1x squared minus 5x minus 14 equals 0, it's in that correct form. So that allows us to identify our a value, which is in front of x squared, so 1. Our b value, which is in front of x, so we want to take that negative 5, make sure you keep the sign with it. And then our c value, which is that last number, negative 14. And then we're going to use these values to plug into that quadratic equation. We're going to replace each letter with its numerical value. So we have x is equal to negative and then b. So whenever you see a variable, you're going to put parentheses, and then inside the parentheses, you're going to put the value of that letter. So b is negative 5 plus or minus the square root of b squared. So I see a variable, so I'm going to put parentheses, b is negative 5. We're going to keep that squared though, that squared stays on the outside. Minus 4 times a is 1, times c is negative 14. And then on the bottom, we have 2a, so 2 times our a value, which is 1. So now we could go through and do all of these mathematical operations by hand, but I am going to encourage you guys to use your calculator. On your Schoology page in your week 3 folder, I did link this scientific calculator that I want you to use. So I'm going to show you how to use that calculator. So with this calculator, we are going to start by hitting this fraction button to get that fraction piece for our quadratic formula. And then we're just going to type in exactly what we wrote down. Now the one piece here is that we have this plus or minus. That means we're going to evaluate this equation 2 times. The first time we're going to do plus, the second time we're going to do minus. So I'll start with putting a plus sign here. Then we had the square root of negative 5 squared minus 4 times a times c, and then 2 times 1. And you can use your keyboard on your laptop to type these in, or this on-screen keyboard, whatever works better for you. And then your answer will show up over here on the right where it says equals, so equals 7. So when we had the plus, it was 7. And now I'm going to go back to my calculator. And this is the reason why I want you to use this calculator, because it's really easy to just go and change this plus sign here to a minus sign. And then we can get our second answer, which is -2. So x is equal to -2, 7. So this is an example when a quadratic equation has 2 solutions. All right, let's try another example. We have 5x squared plus 10x equals -5. So the first thing we need to do is check, is our equation written in this form? It's not, because it's not equal to 0. So we want to go and undo that -5 with a +5 on both sides, which will give us 0 on the right. Then on the left, we just want to make sure we're writing it down in standard form. So we have 5x squared plus 10x plus 5. We can't put any of those together because they're not like terms. So now we can just identify our A, our B, and our C. A is 5, B is 10, and C is 5. We plug these values into our quadratic equation, quadratic formula. X equals -b is 10, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so replace b with 10, minus 4 times a, which is 5, times c, which is also 5, all over 2 times a, which is 5. Now that we've written down, we need to do our plus version and our minus version to get our 2 answers. We can go to our calculator and type that in. Now with this calculator, as I've said, it's editable, so if you haven't cleared this, you can just go in and change the values to match the new values of our new quadratic equation. So that can also make your life easier. So we can see when we have plus in the middle, we get our answer of -1. And now we'll go back to our calculator, change that plus sign to a minus sign, and you can see we also get the answer of -1. So when that happens, both of our answers are the same. We just have one answer. X is equal to -1. So that's an example of when a quadratic equation has only one solution. All right. Our last example here, we have 6x squared plus 7 equals 9x. So again, we want to start by making sure our equation is written just like that in standard form, equal to 0. So to make this equal 0, I need to get rid of this positive 9x with the opposite, minus 9x. 9 take away 9 is 0. And then we just want to rewrite the left side in standard form. So I'm going to start with that 6x squared. Then I want that x term, that minus 9x, and then I want the term with no variable, so that plus 7. And then just make sure you're keeping the signs with the number they're attached to. Now we can identify our A, our B, and our C value. So A is that 6, B is -9, and C is 7. And then we'll take these values, plug those into our quadratic formula. So x is equal to -b, so b is -9, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so -9 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 6, times c, which is 7, all over 2 times a, which is 6. All right, so now we just need to type that into our calculator. So we get -9 plus -9 squared minus 4 times 6 times 7 over 2 times 6. And so now you can see we get undefined. And that will be the same for both the plus in the middle, and if I change that to a minus, we'll get undefined. And that is when we know we have no real solutions. So if you get that undefined when you type in your quadratic formula, that just means there are no real solutions, that that quadratic equation doesn't touch the x-axis at any point. And we're going to talk more in our next lesson about why that comes up as no real solution. But for now, I just want you to know that that's what that means, and then you can apply that to your practice. So you have your Unit 7, Part 5 practice. There's 6 problems, and once you've done all 6 of them, you can do the check-in on Schoology.